All right.
It's recording. You got it.
All right. Have fun.
Okay, see you. Bye. Hello, Michelle.
Hi.
Hi, how are you?
Good. I'm actually finishing my dinner.
Go ahead. So you can mute yourself,
Okay.
and you can just mute yourself until we start. Enjoy your dinner. And I think I have to, if you turn off your video, I think I then have to turn it back on again.
You have to turn it on, or I have to turn it on?
If you turn off your video, then I have to turn it back on. But if you turn off your mute, you can turn your mute on and off yourself.
Okay.
So you can control your own mute. Hello.
Hello, Tim. How are you?
I'm all right. We'll see how this all goes.
Yeah.
And I have to let people in as we go. We have a visitor. The visitor should be muted. Yes. Very weird. You doing well, Greg? You muted yourself.
Yep, doing well. Yeah, just it's chilly. It's just I'm feeling a little chilly in my fingers today.
Tell me about it. It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
It's too early. It's too early.
So yeah. How about you?
Good. Very good.
What's your graduate seminar? Is that at Cornell?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
It's on acoustic horizons. So it's sound studies.
Oh wow. Okay. Neat. I've never taken such a class. So.
Well, it's never too late.
Yeah. Right. Right. I always have the interest of going back to school or getting, other maybe, other kind of certifications in the back of my mind. So,
Right. Hi, Bill. We're muting all guests to the task force.
I'm going to unmute myself. Can you hear me or not?
Yes, but then we're going to mute you because we're
Okay.
just meeting with the task force tonight.
So I'm not sure I'm a guest. So as you know.
Are you going to represent the planning board?
Well, I'm thinking of that, right.
Oh,
At least
okay.
at some of the meetings.
I'm the last person to find these things out.
So I meant to call you or email you. So Catherine can't do it. I don't know. I assume that Mark had told you that.
No, but I kind of gathered.
Okay, so she was just too busy. So I can tune in periodically.
That's fine.
So
Welcome. I'm always
Thursday.
happy to have you.
Well, I was basically, it's okay either way. I was asking your permission basically, because I don't know if it's a good idea or a bad idea, but anyway.
Well, no, I mean, no, we had planned on potentially having a member from the planning board, so it's absolutely, it's marvelous.
All right, well.
And I hope you had a nice vacation.
Yeah. Well, I was home visiting my dad, and he's 99 years old, so.
Wow.
Good to be there.
That's incredible. All right, I'm just writing down. I have to do everything myself, so. We'll see how on time all of our task force is tonight. Jonathan, you can start your video. And Catherine,
Hello.
you can start your video. I hope. Let's see. There we go. And if everybody could please mute yourselves, that'd be helpful too for when we get going. Barb, I saw you, but then you disappeared. Here you are. Here you are. Hi, Barb.
Hello.
We're still waiting for people to arrive. So we're waiting 3 more people, and then we can start our first meeting. If this were the planning board, it would have started immediately right on time, which is what Bill does. I work on French time, which means we anticipate everything will start late. And then we rush to finish on time. Jasmine, Yasmin. Hello, Yasmin.
Hello. Sorry, I'm late.
No problem. And here's Rebecca.
Who is the person labeled visitor?
We don't know. Is the visitor, is that Ken Miller? Is Ken Miller with us?
I do know that there was something sent around for the public to be here, so I don't know.
There is. No, what this is an open meeting, so we would have, I'm just trying to see if the visitor might be Ken Miller. Who's labeled visitor, would you mind identifying yourself? So I know if it's a task force member. Then I'm going to mute you. Okay. It's not Ken Miller.
Hi, everybody. I'm going to keep my video off because my internet is really unstable. I had trouble coming. I'm sorry.
Sorry, so sorry. Well, I think what we can do, hi, I'm Tim Murray, and I'm a member of the Town of Caroline Council, and I'm the chair of the task force for, I've just forgotten the name, the official name of our task force. The task force for, what is the task force? Craig, what is our task force called?
It's land use and economic development.
Thank you. That's it. That's it. You got a prize, Barb. So it's land use and economic development. And we're going to be meeting on a regular basis through the fall in hopes of assisting the town board with advice for various tools for potential implementation in relationship to the revised town vision, and we'll talk about all of this in a little bit. For now, I'd just like to open the meeting, which is open to the public, and we're recording all meetings for public access. And these recordings will be available on the Town of Caroline YouTube channel. And if you need the address, you can write the town clerk and ask where it is, because I'm actually not sure. But I just thought before we started, I could just review some Zoom procedures. We're going to have all of our meetings virtually this fall, and we're going to be using this Zoom platform, and many of you might be far too familiar with it. I'm sure some of you wish that we didn't have to meet on Zoom because you've probably been on it all day already. But it is what it is. And so the way that we will work is all of the official task board members will have their sound and video activated. And we'll go through introductions in a minute. And I'll just ask you to please keep your speakers on mute when you're not talking, because as you know, that it can result in a lot of unwanted background noise. If you're comfortable with leaving your video on, that's sometimes preferable, because if you go off video, I guess if you want to finish your dinner, go off video. But when you go on again, the host needs to reactivate the video. Whereas you can go in and out of sound yourself. It's quite easy. For the public has access to viewing and seeing the meeting live, but the meeting will not be open for public participation, and we'll discuss various procedures for that in a minute. One of the things that probably will be helpful for me to have is right now I'm running the meeting and organizing everything, and also running all of the Zoom integration. And so that means that every time somebody comes on tries to join the meeting, I have to pay attention. I have to let them in, approve them. Sorry. Mark Whitmer just tried to call me for some reason. Maybe after the meeting, if somebody would like to be interested in volunteering to be a co-host, that next week they could just take over this letting people into the meeting, and we can discuss how that works. It's not that complicated. Now, let me see if there's anything. Zoom has a chat function, which is right here. And I am about to disable it. I'm going to make it only for the host. So I'd prefer for us not to be doing back channel chat during the meeting, so that everybody has access to what everyone is saying. If you need to chat with me for some technical reason, you can do so on the chat. But if it's okay with everybody, I'd rather for our meetings not to be a free flow back channel chat situation, which can be incredibly distracting, if not sometimes counterproductive. So that's just a kind of categorical rule that I've decided to implement, if that's okay. If it's not, I guess you can frown really demonstrably and I'll notice, but I think that will be okay. As during our meetings, the best way to get my attention is on if you go down to participants and click that button, there should be, where did it go? There should be a hand signal. And strangely, I don't see it here. Where did it go?
Well,
There's
the host sometimes doesn't have the raise hand capability, so
Oh,
you might
oh,
not
you
be
can't-
seeing what we're seeing.
Okay, good. So you have the raised hand. So the best way is to signal raised hand. Yasmin just did it. And then I will see you. If that's not working, just act out and we'll notice that you're here. In terms of procedures for the meetings, I just like to go over some of the stuff at the very, very outset, if that's okay with everyone. Because these meetings are open to the public, we have the option of permitting public participation, preferably through a privilege of the floor segment at the very beginning of every one of our meetings. We do this for the town board. The planning board does this. And it would seem to me to be a reasonable thing for us to do, as long as it doesn't end up getting too timely, because we're going to have a lot to do. So what I propose is, starting with next meeting, that we do offer the public, in other words, non-members of the task force, the opportunity to address us for no longer than 3 minutes at a piece. Is that agreeable to everyone? Yeah, okay, so we'll do that. And then I think we're kind of somewhat of a largish group. So I think that, and we're going to be meeting for only 2 hours. So we're going to want to try to be as efficient as possible. So if it's okay with you, I think what I would like to do is organize our discussions always through the chair. So if you would like to speak, I'll call on you. My tendency is to try to make sure that any member of the committee who has something to say about a particular issue gets the opportunity to do so before 1 or 2 people completely, through enthusiasm, dominate the conversation. If it's okay with you, I'll pay attention to that. And I don't tend to be particularly strict about this, but if it appears that I need to go through and solicit each of your opinions, I'll do that. Does that sound reasonable as a mode of operation? Okay, and then really the only other procedural matter would be for farther down the line in terms of how we move forward with any proposals or action items. And I was rereading the resolution that established the committee, and that just made it quite clear that it's by majority votes. So we won't have any difficulties deciding that sort of thing down the line. But I don't think we'll have anything. We certainly won't have anything, I hope, to decide tonight. We're missing tonight 3 board members. Ellen Harrison is traveling. Barbara Lynch has a family conflict. And for some reason, Ken Miller, was added to the task force at the past town, just the most recent town meeting, hasn't joined us. I'm sorry, I'm just looking over it because I have to admit people as they show up, which is kind of distracting. That's why I think it'll be helpful to have a co-host. So what I'd like to do now, just to begin, if it's okay with you, is I'd like everyone to introduce yourselves. Just we'll limit this to the task force members. And sorry, I have to look over here. When I go like this, I'm looking at this membership thing, the participants, and so I can make sure what's going on. So maybe I can begin by asking Greg Colucci, who's our planner, who's going to be assisting us greatly. Greg, would you just introduce yourself and say a few words about your background and your interest in helping us out.
Sure. Thanks, Tim. Hello. Some of you I met, or most of you I met at the last meeting where the task force was formed. My name is Greg Colucci. Just a brief background about myself. I grew up in Ithaca. I was a graduate of Caroline Elementary School, and I have a degree in environmental planning and management from SUNY Plattsburgh, and then a master's in urban and regional planning from the Colorado University at Denver. And I worked out there for a number of years before returning back home last summer. And currently I work for Cayuga County, so just north of Tompkins County, doing a little more regional planning and working with some of the towns and villages in that county to help them tackle some similar issues that Caroline is also being faced with here. So I got in touch, or Mark got in touch with me, town supervisor, and so I'm here to help, and I'm very happy and excited to help. And certainly, if anybody has any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Thanks, and Greg's going to take the platform towards the end of the meeting to kind of lay out how he kind of understands possibilities for us. Yusmin.
Hi, I'm sorry. Hi, I'm Yusmin. I've been resident of Tompkins County since 1994. I moved in here to town of Carolina since 2011, after my head injury surgery. I'm interested in helping land use and economic development task force because I have a background a bit in planning. I graduated from City and Regional Planning, Cornell University. I think, I have a grown-up kid too. They live in, one live in Washington, D.C., one live in Lockport. So, thank you so much.
Fabulous. Jonathan, would you like to introduce yourself by unmuting?
Yes, I didn't hear you at first. Thanks for that. Let's see. I've been living on Creamery Road here in town for the last 3 years. We moved here to be with my wife's family, and my son goes to Caroline. We just started our first day of school today, 3rd grade. And let's see, some of my background, for the last 10 or 15 years, I've been focusing on kind of agriculture and gardening, both physical work, but also design work and education. So I have a pretty broad spectrum of land-based experience. I do have a undergraduate and graduate degree, not necessarily in agriculture, and just glad to be here and being able to participate in this important work in making sure that Caroline stays rural and has rural qualities.
Thank you. Fabulous. Michelle. You need to unmute yourself, yes.
Sorry. Let's see. I've lived here since 1995, and both of my kids went to Caroline and Ithaca High School. And Tim, I believe your daughter knows both of them. Mike and Kate Brown. And
I never made that connection.
oh yeah. And Mike and his wife and my grandson are actually living with me for a while, and they're doing a lot of work outside right now. I live on top of Speed Hill, and have a few acres. So, but I actually grew up in near Endicott, New York. So I'm pretty familiar. My grandparents had a farm on Nanticoke Road, so I'm kind of familiar with the whole dairy farm scene. And as we mentioned last time, I'm a book conservator, and I'm semi-retired now, although I do private work, and so I have more time to do other things besides go into work every day. And yeah, so I guess compared to everybody else, I'm not sure I'm that qualified, but I hope I can help. So
Thanks, Michelle. So we have two Barbaras on the task force, but Barbara Lynch isn't here, so that leaves us with one Barb.
Hi, I'm Barbara Newth. I have lived in the town of Caroline since 1987. I have worked at Cornell since 1986. I'm a faculty member in the Department of Natural Resources and Environment. I am shortly leaving my position as Dean of the Graduate School at Cornell and will be full-time back on faculty. I have a undergraduate degree, actually 2 undergraduate degrees, one in Bachelor of Philosophy and a Bachelor
I never knew that.
Bachelor of Philosophy, yep, and Bachelor of Science in Zoology, Master of Science in Environmental Science, and a PhD in Fisheries and Wildlife Science. And that's why I fit into the Department of Natural Resources and Environment. My 2 daughters participated in Caroline Elementary and the Caroline After School program for a number of years, for which I was on the board. That was many moons ago, though.
Thanks so much. Rebecca.
Hi. Let's see. I live on Bald Hill Road, up at the top of the hill. We just got a cell phone tower. I mean, we didn't, our neighbor did. And I think that's partly why, what prompted me to want to volunteer in this capacity, because it's been quite a touchstone or distillation point for all kinds of issues that Caroline is facing around private property rights and how neighbors impact each other and how a community is impacted when something changes, and how we move forward and enact values that we hold dear. So yeah, that's why I'm here. I'm in spiritual care and pastoral care. I'm the chaplain at Longview, and a part-time Quaker pastor. I have a husband and 2 rascally boys who just started online school today. It's been a weird day.
we hope it won't keep being weird.
Could I just jump in a minute and comment, Rebecca, that my mom lives at Longview. She has
Longview,
for the past 5 years.
Ruth Newth, right? Is that your mom?
Absolutely. It's an unforgettable name.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. Okay. I was going to ask, but yeah. I love Ruth.
That's great.
So do we.
And Catherine.
Hi. So I have lived in Caroline since 2001. My brother lives here out on Maple Road. He is good friends with the Maples, who are the founding, like, they own a lot of property out there. Let's see, my kids went to Caroline. I have some commonalities with pretty much all of you. Jonathan, you're my neighbor. I live on Burns Road. I give Erica elderberries all the time and trade some stuff, manure in particular, if anybody needs manure. I have lots of it. Let's see, Houston, I grew up in Lockport, so a little outside of it, so that was kind of funny, in the Buffalo area. And then it's weird, both my kids went to Cass, both went to Ithaca High School. My eldest daughter went to Madison for her master's, and now she's back here getting her PhD at Cornell. And my youngest just graduated from Virginia Tech and is now working at home with me. But I was on that CAS board, the Caroline Elementary School thing, for years. And fun fact, my sister-in-law started CAS when she didn't do child care for her kids. So she was the founder of CAS, and that's why I'm on this committee is I just want to make this town better. I think, you know, I've read almost all the plan. It's still sitting in front of me. I'm at like page 40. And I do agree that it's a time to take some action, and I think small communities have to take care of themselves. I don't think big government does that so much, and I think we have great people in this town, and we can keep many of the wonderful things we have while achieving some growth and sustainability.
Thanks, Catherine. So the task force is, you are the official members of the task force, appointed members, and then the task force also will include 2 representatives, 1 representative of the review board, who's Ellen Harrison, who wasn't able to join us tonight, and Bill Padoka from the planning board. And Bill, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. So yeah, so I'm currently the chair of the planning board. And those duties are going to keep me busy also. So I'm going to tune in here as much as I can. So it might not be every meeting. And I'm also going to need to probably beg out here around 8:30 this evening. But let's see, we've been living here also since the early 90s. I raised my daughter here. However, we're at the very edge of the South Hill School District. So our daughter actually went to South Hill for a few years, but then we homeschooled for most of her elementary, middle school years, went to Ithaca High School, and now she just graduated college. And she is one of those many young people who have totally had to put their life plans on hold because she's a musical theater person, would have been going to New York City, but there's no performances right now. So her life is on hold for a little while. At any rate, we've been living here off Carolina Depot Road for the last over 25 years now.
Well, if you can try to call in. I'm with Ken Miller, 1 second. If you can, yes. Good, okay, thank you. I'm afraid I don't have the number in front of me, but hopefully that's it. Okay. And Ken, if for some reason it doesn't work, we are recording the meeting so we can catch up next week, and I can give you a call and fill you in. Okay, so hopefully it'll work. Thanks for calling. Bye. So I'm sorry, that was Ken Miller who tried to get in on our meeting from the library, the town library, and it wasn't successful. He was the visitor, the official visitor. And so he's going to just try to call in from home. I don't know if it's going to work or not, but hopefully we can work this out next week. Sorry to leave you, Bill, while you're making your introduction. Maybe I should just also introduce myself. So I've been on the town board for 1.5 years. This is technically my 2nd term because I started in the middle of someone else's term. As you were all speaking, I realized that I've been in Caroline since 1981, which makes me feel like a really, really old person, but I was quite young when I came. And we have 2 kids. I live with Renee Farrow on Slaterville Road, kind of a beeline actually between Landon and Snyder Hill Road. So we consider ourselves between Slaterville and Brooktondale and Ithaca. We have all 3 representations. I actually live around the corner from Barb. And we have 2 kids, both of whom are grown. One is in New York City, he's an artist, and my daughter is a choreographer and a curator who works at Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute in Troy. We have just a fabulous group, and I first want to do what I forgot to do at the very beginning, which is thank all of you for your willingness to take the time to serve the town in this way. This is really uncharted territory. The town has never had a task force like this before. And we're really fortunate that we're able to fall on the heels of 6 years of really difficult and patient work by the planning board to revise our comprehensive plan. That will be open for public hearing a week from Thursday. And I think probably it's looking like we'll be able to do those entire procedures so that the town board will be able to hold its own public hearing and approve it by the end of the year, if not sooner, hopefully. And so in the meantime, the board has decided to establish this task force somewhat in response to a really fortunate outpouring of public interest in these issues of land and economic planning, again, which is also something that's somewhat unusual for the town. So I got involved in town politics. I just might mention at the end of my bio, when I personally passed a petition across the town to ask the town board to do something about junk, which at the time in the mid 80s was just incredibly prevalent all over the town. And I received, this petition was signed by people completely across the political spectrum and economic spectrum in the town. I think I had close to 200 signatures. I presented it at the town board, and their response was to move me out of, to invite me to move out of the town if I didn't like the way things were. So unfortunately, that got me politically active in the town, and I've been politically active ever since. So this is kind of a landshed moment for me. Now I might just begin by just very briefly rehearsing the charge of the task force as was articulated in the resolution, the town board's resolution establishing us. So the resolution says that the task force is charged with researching tools, parenthesis, laws, ordinances, and regulations, etc., that promote the values and vision of the town as expressed in the comprehensive plan, understood revised comprehensive plan. It further states that the committee shall pursue and examine the following matters and charges identified by the town's planning board in its update of the town's comprehensive plan in respect to its basic mission. And the following matters and charges are listed as such. 1, formula business restrictions. 2, zoning laws. 3, economic impact review laws. 4, solar wind siting laws. And I might mention that that's actually not any longer in our purview because Energy Independent Caroline has agreed to pick up that task in dialogue with the planning board. And 5, any other tools such as design guidelines that may promote the town's vision. So that's kind of our charge. It's extremely broad. But I think it's important for us to remember that it's really a tools-based charge. The planning board has already worked on the comprehensive plan. It's articulated it. It will hold its public hearing, which all of us are welcome to attend and participate in. And as a result of that input, then it will make any necessary revisions. It will then submit the plan to the town board. The town board also will hold a public hearing and engage in a similar process. So our role won't be to evaluate or tweak the comprehensive plan, but our role will be to investigate, discuss, and perhaps propose very particular tools that would help towards its implementation. Another, I think you're all aware of this, but just another background item in relationship to this is we were established in the middle of a pause, a townwide 6-month pause in site plan review. That was, of course, catalyzed by the proposal. Oh, Ken is here. Let me see if I can admit him. Sorry, I didn't see him. Hold on one second. Ken, is that you? If it is, you should be able to speak, I think. Ken, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Fabulous. Ken, we've just finished introductions of the members of the task force. Since we have you, would you mind introducing yourself? And then you can catch up on everybody's introductions by looking at the recording, the video recording of the meeting later in the week. So would you mind introducing yourself?
Ken Miller. I got a farm on Lonsbury Landon Road. Lived in the area for over 4 years. Graduated college, been in the Marine Corps, done a lot of different jobs and settled on farming. Grew up on a dairy farm. Want to know anything else about me?
That's great. We appreciate it. Thank you. We're very happy you were able to join us. I'm sorry I didn't realize that it was you as the visitor earlier.
Well, it didn't make any difference because it was the library isn't set up to do a Zoom. It has no camera and it has no microphone.
No, that's terrible. Well, we're going to have to try to work on that, aren't we? That's something
Yeah, I
that
guess.
needs to work on. And we'll get on that.
We'll get it.
Actually, I hope to get on that soon. Thank you. Thank you very much, Ken. So I was
All right.
just explaining to everyone, Ken, that the charge of the task force is to develop, to research, investigate, and perhaps propose tools that would assist in land and economic planning for the town and in relationship to recommendations made by the revised comprehensive plan. And then I was just explaining the context that this work has arisen in relationship to the 6-month pause for site plan review instituted by the town board on June 10th, and that pause will expire, I believe it's December 10th. So this puts us in what the town board would appreciate is if the task force would be able to come up with basic recommendations, ideally before that. And my hope is that if we're able to meet bi-weekly, which is the plan, except for next week, we're going to meet next week and then we'll start bi-weekly. And I think that works out, except for, I believe, Rebecca, did you say that you have, someone said that they had conflicts on the third Wednesday of every month?
I have a conflict the third Monday of every month.
Or the third Monday. Okay, I think what we'll do is next week we'll just figure out how to deal with that. Because you don't have a conflict next week, is that correct?
Next week.
I don't.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Rebecca, is it next week you have a conflict or not?
Right. Yeah. Next week. Yep. Next week is the third week.
Okay, well, we'll meet next week and then the following 2 weeks, we'll just figure out how to do that. Maybe what we'll do is we'll meet back to back the following times. So we end up avoiding the third week in the rotation, but we'll figure that out. Okay.
Okay.
So that's basically the charge, and the town board would be really appreciated if the task force would be able, with the leadership of Greg, and I think we're going to rely on Greg quite heavily, the expertise of Greg and his knowledge and understanding about how to approach tool making and the formulation of tool making. Ideally have some concrete results by the beginning of November. So if we were able to present something to the town board for its November meetings, then it could either take action on that or be prepared to do so in December, or understand what the next course would be. Any questions about this in terms of the charge and just generally what we're here to do? Okay, well, I think then the next thing that I thought it would be helpful, so for the rest of the evening, I thought it might be helpful for us to review and discuss the number of bulleted action items in the revised comprehensive plan that fall in 3 areas: livability, environmental protection and natural resources, and rural character. And I think I'm thankful that you all had a chance to review the plan. It's not a short document. I happen to think that it's really well researched, and I know that the planning board just spent huge amounts of time working on this document. I'm sure we'll spend a little bit more, but I thought that it might be helpful for us just to kick around in general so we kind of understand the territory, the recommended actions in relationship to tools, specific tools. And maybe what I could do is we could start with livability, and I could just read the 2 bullet points that I extracted from this that pertain to tools. And we can do the same for each document. And then when we're done just kind of kicking this around to begin a conversation, then we'll turn the rest of the meeting over to Greg, who will rein us in and correct us if we're all wrong. Does that sound like a good way to proceed? Good.
Is this page 21?
So we're going to begin with page 13.
13. All right, thank
Page
you.
13, which are actions. And what I did is I just extracted the 3 actions that would be most pertinent to the charge of this task force. And one action is to explain and enact land use planning regulations, such as zoning, design guidelines, and formula business restrictions that encourage locally owned businesses that integrate with the rural, residential, and agricultural nature of the town, and discourage commercial development that would negatively affect local agriculture, business, and residential communities. And maybe what I could do just real quickly is ask Greg if he wouldn't mind telling us. I think we all can understand what zoning might be writ large, and design guidelines probably writ large, but maybe not everybody would even have a clue what formula business restrictions are. So Greg, would you just mind a small explanation of that?
Sure. Yep. Thanks, Tim. So formula businesses in general are defined. They're defined in many different ways, but essentially they are businesses like McDonald's or chain stores, chain retail, and restaurants, especially. We see a lot of Dollar Generals and dollar stores. Walmart can be considered a formula business store. But a lot of just chain restaurants too. So they're defined by not only their look on the outside, but also by the formula merchandise that they sell or the formula products that they sell. And so that's generally those types of businesses in a nutshell. And so restricting formula business restrictions, now you can't really restrict kind of what they sell, but formula business restrictions can be about their appearance or about the site design that they may need. So often if you were just to Google formula business restrictions, you might come up with a number of different articles that have talked about how communities have proposed or enacted guidelines relating to the design of the building, or outright prohibiting them in a certain zone district. And that's important as we move forward into understanding these types of restrictions a little bit better, is that it seems from initial research that formula business restrictions can't necessarily apply town-wide without the use of a zoning ordinance to back them up in some sort of district fashion. But that's them generally in a nutshell. I mean, I think it would be good, and Tim, we could kind of talk about this as towards the end of the meeting in terms of homework. But I think it would be good for folks to read about some of the articles that we have.
And we have some very helpful overview articles that we'll be distributing in relationship to this. I didn't want to bog any of you down with this week, since I thought it would be most helpful to be shaped by the comprehensive plan, which is actually why this language of business restrictions got into our charge, because it's one of the things recommended by the comprehensive plan. Any questions for Greg about this, everybody? Rebecca?
Maybe you were just about to move on to this, but I wondered if you could define zoning for me.
Greg, you gonna tackle that?
Yeah, great. Yeah, thanks. Was that Rebecca? I think that
Yes.
Yeah, great. So I don't have a definition right in front of me, but essentially zoning is, if you think of a zone, so that's the root word there, that it's all about the separation of land uses. So if we can, I'll just take a step back in time. It was actually about 100 years ago. It started in New York City, where there were industries on top of houses. Essentially, imagine it just a big booming industry right next door to your home. And so the idea of zoning came about that we should separate land uses out and regulate them differently. So they're given different rights, and different landowners can have different rights based on the types of uses that they're allowed. So I would say zoning is the separation of land uses with separation of standards. Zoning will define uses. They'll define where uses can go. They'll define how they can develop. So thinking about how high or how wide they might go in terms of dimensional standards. And they often will restrict design. So that's generally it.
So does it have the power of law?
Oh yeah, yeah. So a zoning ordinance is a very powerful tool for local communities to regulate the development of their community. I will say this: oftentimes zoning can make towns a little bit fearful to enact zoning. Often zoning is attributed to development, and so how to regulate development. Well, if a town says, well, we don't want development, but zoning can actually be used to restrict that development and to essentially it says where certain development can go. And yes, it is a very powerful tool. It is granted to towns through the Zoning Enabling Act of New York State.
Barbara, did you have a question?
Same question. It was about zoning, so it's been covered. Thank you.
And Ken, we can't see you, so I can't tell if you're raising your hand. So if you have a question, it would be fine just for you to speak up, and we'll hear you, and then we can fit you in accordingly.
Okay, I don't right now.
Okay, great, thanks. So to go back to the action items on livability, just if we go down this laundry list a little bit, just so we're all on the same page. Another tool action item under livability, and which is still on page 13 of the plan, is develop a process to strengthen reviews of significant commercial development to include economic impact reviews. Greg, could I turn over to you again?
Sure, thanks, Tim. Economic impact reviews are also something that we will be researching more, but essentially they deal with looking at a town's economic viability and determining whether a certain type of use, a certain business might impact that economic viability of the local economy. And so the review laws might set a threshold to say, we can absorb 2 more of X type businesses and only 1 more Y type business. And so that's it in a very small nutshell. But we will be researching them more as they are part of our charge.
Questions? Okay, so the last bullet point then that I extracted from livability turns out not really to pertain to us, but I thought I'd just bring it up anyway, which is towns develop a town strategy for cell tower siting. That's actually something that the planning board is going to take on when it's completed its work on the comprehensive plan. So we're hoping to have a town telecommunications plan, which would include cell tower siting. But so that really, I think we should all be really relieved that that falls outside of our purview, because it's another big nut to crack, but it's something that the town is very much invested in pursuing. So that's the livability section. So
So
the
Tim,
planning board- yes.
Tim, before you move on to that, there's a bullet on creating residential development guidelines. Would that fit in our charge given we're land use and economic development?
Yes, and for some reason I skipped over that. So that it certainly could.
Okay.
And thanks, Barbara. I appreciate that. Rebecca, did you have your hand up? Rebecca? Oh, maybe that's from before. Your little blue hand is, oh, your little blue hand is still up. Yeah, okay. The next section that we can look at is environmental protection and natural resources. And the action items are on page 21 of the plan. And the first one that I extracted, and please call my attention if I leave something out, is require review of a significant project to consider its impact on the natural resources of the town, open space, visual resources, air, water, noise, light, and climate change impacts. And so this is a little bit more of a quality aspect rather than a quantity aspect, I guess. Is that a good way of putting it, Greg?
Yes, I would say so.
Okay.
And with some of them, those can be involved with some of these restrictions that we talked about. Asking them to put a solar panel on a roof, lighting that doesn't affect everybody. Is that the kind of thing that you're talking about? And are those restrictions in a site review plan, or are those restrictions in the zonings?
Greg, can you answer that?
Yeah, I think in general, Ken, what Tim had the first that action item, yes, it could include. I think what you're referring to, I heard that the solar access that can be adopted by towns, having some sort of law requiring that whoever is putting up solar might have some sort of say in how I would say having that open, that is included, but I think it is a broader action item in terms of looking at all of the open space, visual, air, climate change impacts. It's really a huge action item, but we might be able to kind of get further into it more. Does that answer your question? I sort of was stumbling around there with the solar. I was trying to get to the right section of the comp plan here.
Well, I don't think it answers my question. I guess from before the other action item of formula business restrictions, and if there are whatever type of business that might come in, retail business, say, are these specific areas of concern, noise, light, water, etc., climate change, are those things to put in to restrictions in a zoning plan or in site review plan?
That's a really good question, and I'm glad you're asking that. Both, so they can go into both, or I would say either or. And
okay,
so,
well, thank you.
Yeah, so what we're essentially going to look at is, well, one of our tasks is going to see what paths should we take. The town could take both paths, but one, which is that the zoning ordinance, would be a longer process. But I can just leave it at that. But yes, these things can be addressed in either a zoning ordinance or some local law adoptions for site plan restrictions.
Okay, thank you.
So the next item, just to keep moving along, that I extracted would be this is still from Environmental Protection and Natural Resources, would be to require an escrow fund for site remediation if a project were abandoned by the party that built it. So this would be a case if there were a large structure that was built, say, for commercial purposes, the possibility of the town requiring an escrow that would cover its removal if abandoned. And I think an example of this is there are a number of sites across Tompkins County with abandoned kind of common structures that were built for commercial purposes and very, very quickly left abandoned, and the company just dumps them there. And so I think that this is a a recommendation in the comprehensive plan to empower the town to watch out for something like that, or to guard its interests in that case. Again, these are all recommendations, and they're things that we can have plenty of time to unpack. Any questions about that one? And I should mention that the comprehensive plan actually clarifies that we're talking about something that's abandoned after its use, so not something that is sold to another party, for example, just to clarify. There's also a recommendation in the Environmental Protection and Natural Resources section to create a town environmental review, which is a TECR. I'm actually, that probably wouldn't fall within the purview of the task force as a short-term goal, but I just wanted to mention it as part of the overall layering package of the comprehensive plan. And then something that we could end up addressing rather robustly potentially is in a recommendation to develop design guidelines that would encourage sustainable over non-sustainable designs, durable over cheap designs, and flexible designs over singular use designs. And those would be tools that would be appropriate both for site plan review potentially, and could be appropriate for a larger zoning platform, right, Greg?
Yes. Yeah, they could be developed into the design guidelines.
And then finally, under environmental protection and natural resources, I noted the recommendation to create an environmental justice statement to help guide land use planning decisions. Develop an environmental justice statement to help guide land use planning decisions. Again, that could or could not be something that this task force would decide to take on to facilitate implementation of the comprehensive plan. One of the things that I think that we'll discuss next week after Greg gives us further leadership tonight is how we might want to proceed, whether we break into small working groups or tackle one topic at a time. And Greg and I will come up with some recommendations for that later in the week. So any questions about any of these environmental protection, natural resources bullet points?
Yes, I have a question.
Yes, excuse me.
And what is an environmental justice statement? What is that?
My understanding, Ken, is that an environmental justice statement would be a statement by the town committing to social justice in relationship to environmental use and development, in relationship, say, to equity, economic diversity, and access. Many things probably would be related to that, as I understand it. I haven't myself worked on this area myself.
If
Right.
I may, it's actually outlined in the draft. There's
Yes.
an environmental justice section, and it's very clear what it's stating. And it actually takes some language from the US EPA. The goal of the environmental justice will be achieved when everyone enjoys the same degree of protection from environmental and health hazards, equal access to decision-making process to have a healthy environment in which to live, learn, and work. That's
Perfect.
just what's in the plan right now.
Thanks, Jonathan. That was very helpful. Thank you.
In this new draft.
Pardon
Correct.
me?
That's correct.
You were saying it's in the new draft, and what page is that? I just want to read it again when I get a chance.
Yes, it's page 14.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments about this section?
To quickly just follow on that, I mean, the point of environmental justice is that it has historically been true that either rural poor, which is particularly relevant to Caroline, or communities of color have tended to face the environmental burdens of whatever, pollutants, production, whatever. So that's where that's going towards. So just to fill in a bit on the definition that Jonathan read.
Thanks, Bill. Thank you very much. Anyone else?
Sorry. Okay, go ahead.
No, go ahead. I'll raise my hand.
Yasmin, you had your hand raised, and I think Rebecca then has her hand raised. Yasmin?
Yeah. Okay. I just, maybe that phrase on page 16 still bothering me about the water, and it's connected with the St. Lawrence River and the Chesapeake Bay, which is like, okay. Yeah, maybe, I don't know. Maybe because I didn't join the writing of the comprehensive plan, so I don't know what is the reason behind that. So page 16 about water, and we talk about the so where is that? The comprehensive plan. Yeah, connecting the watershed in Caroline to major northeastern watershed that they, like St. Lawrence Seaway and Chesapeake Bay. I don't know. Maybe you can clarify that part. Thank you.
I believe, Bill, correct me if I'm wrong, that this is a recognition that the town of Caroline falls along two different water paths, and so that the southeastern section of the town flows into the Chesapeake watershed. It would be towards the very top of it, and most of the other tributaries of the town, such as 6 Mile Creek, then flow into Cayuga Lake, which is a St. Lawrence watershed. So we're just in this particular water situation of representing two flows in different directions at the same time, the same topography. Is that, Bill, did I get it right? Thanks. And I should have asked Barbara just to answer the question. That would have been good. Rebecca, did you have a question?
I just have a point of process question. Do we have somebody taking notes, taking
Yeah.
minutes?
Yes, we do. Greg is taking minutes, and the meeting's being recorded.
Great.
Thanks. If there are no more comments just about this section, then we'll just end up with rural character, which is the last section of the comprehensive plan. And the action items are on page 35. And the two that I extracted that I thought would be most pertinent to our work are enact legislative land regulations, which would preserve the rural character in the face of development pressure, i.e. nodal development, development focus zones, traditional zoning, and or formula business restrictions. This somewhat repeats a lot of the action items that we've already covered, but in this particular case, it's meant to put the pressure point on preserving rural character. And then the second one that I extracted is to empower the review board to utilize design guidelines to reach determinations regarding projects subject to site plan review. So again, this is somewhat iterative in terms of what we've already covered.
And can I ask what nodal development is?
Nodal development, Bill, would you like to answer that question?
Yeah, so the basic idea is that maybe you think of it as cluster development. You have development that tends to like be in smaller regions of the town. So you've got one node over here and one node over there, but not, I mean, it's a lot of stuff in between. That helps preserve the agricultural and open space and that sort of stuff. So the idea is that you have just certain specific areas of town that might have more concentrated development. That's my rough understanding of nodal development. Little nodes out there with open stuff in between. That's my thumbnail sketch.
And so Ken, if you wanted to think just about the current clusters of development in Caroline, so you have Brooktondale, Sladeville Springs. Probably a nodal development would be understood to be in West Slaterville, especially if you consider the large rental gingerbread cottages as part of that. Probably the area west of Snyder Hill Road along the 79 corridor, Speedsville, etc. Does that help you understand the general?
I think so. I think so.
Yeah. Other questions, comments? So this is kind of what I extracted in terms of just to kind of warm us up in terms of the kind of overall actions recommended by the comprehensive plan that for which our charge echoes, I think. I mean, you can hear a lot of the language in the charge of the things that the town board suggested we look at as delineated in the draft of the comprehensive plan. Any other comments just in terms of these areas? And before I turn the rest of the meeting over to Greg, who then I think is going to lay out a more strategic understanding of some of these items.
Tim, if no one else does, I just got a question, I guess, since I farm, and I see in that action item, install right to farm signage, which would be great. It's usually, though, on the outskirts of your town. Does Tompkins County or Caroline or, yes, I guess if it's in the county, then it would be in Caroline, have a law that says you buy a house or you buy property and intend to put a house, or even if you don't intend to put a house, that you sign a paper understanding that this is a right to farm area and there will be noises sometimes late at night, there may be odd smells, etc., etc. Do we have that in our town?
I don't know. I don't believe we've actually passed that. Have we, Bill?
Yeah, Caroline is a right to farm
It's a right to
community.
farm.
That law was passed. What specifically to Ken's question, I don't know, because I don't know the law, if it says, and therefore you have to sign a piece of paper, but I'm pretty sure that one of the planning board members mentioned that indeed when they bought their property, they had to sign something that they acknowledged that they were, at least I guess they were in ag districts, so maybe it was different for them. So Ken, to your specific question of do people have to sign off on something that says, I acknowledge I'm in a right to farm community and I'm next to a farm and I understand they might make noises and smells. I don't know if that specific document exists, but I do know we're a right to farm community.
And of course, this is one of the things that is representative of the huge transformation of the town since I've been its resident. When we bought our house, which was a farm, it was a farmhouse, and had been a working farm until about 10 years before we bought the property. There were roughly, I think it was 23 working farms in the town of Caroline. This is in the early 80s, right, Ken? And now there are, I believe, 3.
Oh.
And so what that's ended up doing is potentially putting pressure on the long-standing farmers if the land around them is developed and occupied by residents who, for various reasons, would lack an understanding of what it means to live in a farming community.
Well, I think there are 5.
5 now.
But as a farmer myself, if I'm going to do something, spray, I try to let neighbors know, hey, this is what's going to happen. You want to close your windows to your house, and be careful with my neighbors. Not that every farmer is that way, but just that. My concern is that I don't see that in this plan. So that's the reason I want to know, do we have that? Do you have to sign them? If not, I think we have to put that in here someplace, whether it be the comprehensive plan or in our laws. Make sure they realize they're in an agricultural area.
Jonathan?
Yeah, I think that's important to consider. I did notice on page 34, under the changing agricultural landscape strategies for addressing, right to farm laws is mentioned as a protection tool. So the fact that it sounds like we already have something on the books, but maybe it needs to be revisited to make it more robust.
And we can do further research into the robust nature of what we have. Bill, did you think of something?
The only thing I wanted to add is that, basically this sounds like good feedback for the planning board, not necessarily this task force.
Right.
So, but, take it as you wish. But Ken, that's great. And pass, if you're going to either comment in writing or in person, by Zoom for the planning board version of the comp plan, please, send those comments in. That's a good one.
Okay. What I'll do is call Cooperative Extension and see what they know as far as whether it just exists for ag district land or if the whole county has to do this. And then if it does, then we got to make sure that real estate people and whatnot know this.
Very good point. And we can help to look into that as well with the planning board. Okay, well, I hope this has been helpful just to kind of do this overview summary of kind of touchstones in the action items of the comprehensive plan to get an idea of the smorgasbord of potential tools that we could think about engaging in further investigation, if not development. Maybe this would be an appropriate way for me to pass the torch to Greg, just to, Greg, hear your thoughts, hear your thinking about approaching the task force. And we're very, very fortunate to have both an incredibly experienced membership in the task force, but also to be led by such an informed planner as Greg. So Greg, would you like to carry the torch?
Sure, absolutely. Thanks, Tim. And I do just want to bring up 2 points before I dive in to kind of maybe next steps. Going back to that environmental justice area, I actually had my hand raised, but that's all right because I'll lower my hand. That's fine. New York State does have environmental justice areas defined. If you just search environmental justice areas, New York State, you will come up with a list of counties. You can click on Tompkins County and it'll show you Caroline does not have any. They are within the town of Ithaca. They are defined by a certain percentage of minorities in urban population, a certain percentage of minority populations within rural areas, and then as well as a certain poverty threshold. But that doesn't mean that Caroline can't adopt its own or propose. It sounds like a statement about that. So without knowing too much further other than that about what Caroline might be thinking, I'll just kind of leave it at that. And then secondly, about the right to farm, because the town of Caroline has adopted the right to farm law, that is granted under the New York Ag and Markets Law, which is a very protected law. And so while there could be a statement or some sort of paper that a new homeowner has to sign, I think that would be good for the homeowner to know. However, it really is part of the new homeowner's due diligence to know what they're buying into. Unfortunately, in my profession, I've seen that people buying homes often just have no idea what they're walking into, whether it's about the home itself, or where they're being located, and so that it is unfortunate. So those are just my kind of 2 cents on those things. I'm not saying to discourage the town from creating some sort of statement that someone needs to sign for buying a new home, but just letting you know, Ken, that you are protected from any nuisance law claims.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. All right. Well, with that, so there is a lot here, and I think it was very helpful, Tim, that you went over those action items. I was kind of furiously scribbling notes on them, just to give us a framework of what we might be looking at. It certainly does seem like a lot. I think, well, there's kind of 2 general camps that I'm looking at. One is part of our charge is to educate the town board on these certain land use controls. And then the other charge is to possibly, or the other general charge is to possibly adopt a land use control of some sort by the expiration of the moratorium.
Or to recommend.
Or yeah, to recommend. And so, well, with that being said, Tim, you had mentioned before that possibly bringing something to the town board by November might be appropriate in order to be reviewed. Oh no, I said Tim, not.
So far, not.
Go ahead, Greg.
Yeah.
I think we're just hearing some background noise.
Sure. So actually, Tim, if you could clarify just the recommendation portion, are we? Is the town board expecting that? I mean, through this, that there might be something to be adopted by December 10th, or it's.
I think that if the task force were to identify an action item or items that were economical enough to consider adopting in the short term, it would welcome articulation of those. I mean, off the top of my head, I could think of, for example, design recommendations. There was a lot of public interest in this over the summer around the standard commercial development guidelines, that sort of thing. Or if the task force were to decide either as an alternative or in addition to that, to encourage pursuit of some kind of broader zoning approach. I mean, that would obviously probably be a bigger chunk than we could chew in 2 months. But I would think that it would be part of the purview of the task force to think about making recommendations in that direction, if not even more focused guidance in terms of where that might go. Does that help?
Yes, yes, thank you. Yeah. Okay, well, with that being said, just generally looking at the time frame where this does expire December 10th, the town board meeting before that will be December 1, and then before that, in the beginning of November, they meet. So they meet. There's the first Tuesday of every month. That
Well, it actually there'll be an agenda meeting on Tuesday, December 1st, and the town board meeting on Wednesday, December 9th. That would precede that
okay.
that date. And I should mention to everybody that it wouldn't be inconceivable that the task force could even choose to recommend extending the moratorium or suggest to the town board. I mean, if what ends up being recommended is too complicated to enact in the immediate short run, but perhaps achievable in a longer short run, say in another 6 months, I mean, that could be something to take into consideration. I wouldn't think that we'd want to prioritize that right now necessarily. I mean, I'd recommend that we think short term now and worry about the long term once we have that kind of vision. Does that help, Greg?
Yeah, yeah, thank you. So with that being said, I think what I would recommend just starting off is to spend at least the next couple of weeks just doing some investigative just homework among our task force. Tim and Mark and I have already started, and a number of other people, and maybe some of you all have too, in terms of researching about different land use controls. If not, I mean, that's what I am here for. I can help to guide those types of homework assignments, if you will, over the next couple weeks, in terms of zoning, formula business restrictions, economic impact review laws, and then design guidelines. And some of the action items, I was taking note that they can be included in some of those categories. And so you might come across some of those action items language within reading of certain types of land use controls. But ultimately what I think, I mean, just right off the bat, is that the best course of action, at least for the best short-term course of action, is to work on commercial design guidelines and have that be a part of the site plan review. Currently, the town does have a site plan review law. And for those of you who don't know what a site plan review law is, it's essentially, it's a commercial plan for a specific site. And because Caroline does not have any zoning, there's no restriction on where necessarily that commercial use can go. Essentially, some of this terminology, however, as I'm even explaining it, I realize might be difficult to understand without knowing some of the backbones of land use regulation. Typically, I mean, I just want to kind of back up and say that, you know, it's very good that Caroline is going through a comprehensive planning update right now. That is the starting point for any land use regulation. A land use regulation does not have any teeth whatsoever, or even it can't really hold in a court of law, I don't think, without some sort of comprehensive plan, a land use plan for the town. So Caroline is doing the first sort of foundational step. Typically after that, towns do adopt a zoning ordinance, because the comp plan lays out the policy, and then the zoning ordinance is the regulatory action items, or no, I shouldn't say action items, but they're the regulatory approach of how to see the comp plan through And then after a zoning ordinance is typically adopted, there might be use-specific controls or district-specific controls. So use-specific control would be what Caroline does have. So currently the site plan review design guidelines are intended for commercial uses over a certain size, over 10,000 square feet in size. A district style approach might be some sort of overlay zone that they're called, which could be some sort of like historic district or a business district, but a floodplain district, an agricultural district. So there's other types of, there's these comp plan zoning and then district specific controls and use specific controls. Because it doesn't seem possible to be going through a zoning ordinance adoption right now, however, that could be part of the recommendations. The next best thing, it seems that with this comprehensive plan being updated and hopefully adopted by the end of the year, is that they could be tagged along with some sort of other types of commercial design guidelines, because Caroline already has a starting place for a site plan review law. As I'm speaking about this, I realize there's a lot of jargon that I'm saying, it feels, in terms of some of these words, if you don't have a kind of a background of dealing with some sort of land use law or techniques, which is why I think that the very first step would be that we spend the next couple of weeks just doing reading, and Tim and I can work together. I have a number of things that I think should be read, but we can figure out what to be distributed among the group to highlight some of these, and then maybe at the next meeting or the following meeting we can decide how best to proceed. I'm proposing how best we should proceed, which is pursuing some sort of commercial design guideline. But I think the task force is an advisory committee, and so it's not just me. But unless Tim, you had another idea, but I feel that if the task force wants to kind of go a different way, then that's just part of the advisement of the committee.
Well, I think that one of the things that we can do next week is go a little bit more in depth based on some readings that we can distribute into formula business restrictions and design guidelines, with the understanding that these would be, I don't want to say it pejoratively, but kind of adhesives or band-aids outside of the realm of zoning, which is a much larger action. And if we can spend the week doing some readings that we can distribute within the next couple of days, providing overviews of some of these strategies, then my hope is that we could have a conversation about this next week, and then maybe even decide somewhat more in a more organized fashion how to proceed. I'm hoping that we won't spend the entire month of September having general conversations about how we might think about being able to proceed, but maybe even by the end of next meeting saying, okay, now let's imagine that it would be most economical to move first in this direction, and decide how we want to research that, and or maybe we'll decide next week that we might want to move in 2 or 3 directions at the same time with smaller working groups. So there are a number of strategies that I think that we can come up with after we have a more common language next week. Does that sound feasible, Greg?
Yeah, and yeah, that I think is the best starting place, is that as I'm describing about these different paths that we could take, and ultimately we do have to we likely have to explore, we're going to have to explore multiple paths. It's difficult to speak about them without having a common language. So yeah, I think that does sound like a good first step between now and the next meeting.
Does everyone have space in their imaginaries to do some not overwhelming reading for next week if we were to distribute 2 or 3 articles? And what I have in mind is really not taxing at all. They're actually quite short, but they give really helpful overviews to some of these approaches. Catherine?
And will we be, you're going to give us these articles. Are there going to be like directives of what we should be tasked to look at, why we're reading them, like what to guide what we should be gleaning from this? Like, I guess I want an action item out of our assignment. So like you said, I don't want all of September just to be, you know, casual conversation or something.
Well, I think that for next week, the goal is to provide us with some common background so that we have somewhat of a uniform basis for understanding how we might proceed. And then it might well be that with Greg's guidance, we can then whittle that down quite strategically by the end of the next meeting to really begin to be, I mean, I want us to move quickly, frankly, in terms of doing some active consideration of particular action items that we think we might be able to achieve, and or we need to decide about areas that we don't think are viable or feasible in terms of the bullet points that were presented to us by the town board. So maybe after 1 meeting or 2 meeting, we would come to a consensus. I'm not recommending this, but it's just a hypothesis that, let's say, formula business restrictions might not end up being appropriate for a town like Caroline that doesn't have any zoning to sustain it. Then we eliminate that and we can move on very, very economically. I do think we have to consider that option because it's been highly encouraged by both the comprehensive plan, the revised comprehensive plan, and it's one of the name charges of the task force. But it well could be that and maybe something as humongously large as zoning we might want to set aside. Barbara?
Yeah, I'm a little bit confused as to why the prior discussion and Greg mentioned, you know, right, like just jumped into commercial design guidelines as the thing that we should do. I mean, our charge specifically says, you know, specifically mentions zoning laws, economic impact review laws, and formula business restrictions specifically, and other tools that may promote the town's vision. So, you know, it would seem to me that at the very least, the task force would need to do some analysis of the pros and cons of each of these things that have been bulleted for us to lay out why or why not, at, you know, at least at a high general level, something is appropriate for the town of Caroline to consider. So I'm just a little bit confused why we you know, just kind of launched into commercial design guidelines as the way to go, where I don't think in this group there's a widespread understanding of the pros and cons of formula business restrictions, zoning laws, and economic impact review laws.
Yeah, thank you, Barbara. You know, that's why I backed off from that, recognizing that this is an entire committee. It's not just my recommendation.
So, I mean, I think that one of the things that we'll want to do, Barbara, in relationship to that is spend at least the next couple of meetings familiarizing ourselves with the general guidelines of these areas, of these pressure points, with readings, so that we can begin to be in a position of even imagining what to prioritize.
Yeah, and you know, just given the time that we have, it may be that, you know, 2 or 3 people tackle drafting pros and cons of formula business restrictions, and 2 or 3 people take zoning laws and so.
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm imagining will happen next week.
I think Michelle's next.
Michelle. And this does work much better just to raise your hands. You're on mute, Michelle.
There. Anyway, is your vision that we will be assigned these readings, and will we report on them next time, or what? How will we transmit what we've learned from reading?
Well, I think that goes back to Rebecca's question, I believe, or maybe it wasn't Rebecca, but just about, you know, what are we getting out of these? Is this just for reading? I think we're just taking this as a general understanding, and then the being able to read some of these articles. There's just a few we can just distribute, and then the agenda next time we'll be able to propose some questions for the group to just have a little bit of a kind of a question and discussion session, unless you think that kind of between now and then to have questions proposed, but I think reading some of these types of land use controls might help to just dictate our conversation in terms of where our agenda will go next time. But I mean, it might be thinking about process, because process is a huge component of this, about the short-term and long-term applicability of these. And maybe that's a good frame of reference as we're reading is, do we have the tools currently to be adopting this, or what would it take to adopt this? I mean, just being able to understand, I think, just to know, I mean, for example, if we're taking a formula business restrictions, and I think as you might be reading about some of these restrictions, to understand, or at least to note about what does it take for a town to be adopting these types of restrictions? That was my first question when I was reading these. Is it, can a town just adopt just a law to restrict these? That was my first question, was, can a town just outright restrict them? And I was led to the answer, not really. And that led me to further questions. So that may be a useful kind of frame of mind, that just what would it take?
As I'm imagining, next week, after Greg and I are able to decide what to distribute, would be organizing the meeting around discussion of the particular 2, 3, 4 areas of tools that are open to us based upon those readings. So we would certainly want to spend, I think, a good chunk of time talking about the commercial business restrictions. And we'd want to spend some time talking about zoning writ large, which I think is important for us as a group, at least, to understand what that might mean, whether there are what the different options could be, just very, very generally, right, Greg? And then both touching upon economic development guidelines and also design guidelines. So if we were able just to organize next week's meeting around common discussions of these 3 or 4 elements, then by the end of the meeting, I think that we might be in a position of imagining economical ways to organize ourselves to move forward in terms of further research and development. Jonathan?
Yeah, thanks. Back to Barbara's questions, and I think what Greg was talking about. It seems to me that without zoning, some of these tools might not work. And so it seems to me what you're saying, Greg, maybe is that the commercial design guidelines, if we attach that kind of ordinance to laws that we already have, like things that could be already attached to laws that we already have, might be more effective than those that need the zoning laws enacted to make them have teeth. It seems to me that if that's one way to do pros and cons, like if there are tools that don't work without zoning and some that might based on the laws we already have, that seems like it's a way to filter the things we should be working on. If that's not possible, then there's got to be another way to frame it, but it seems like that might be one way to frame it.
Yeah, Jonathan, I think yeah, thank you for saying that, because that is what I was trying to get at a little bit there, and I think that is a good frame to have. Yeah, I just want to reiterate, I certainly don't want to just come across saying we should just propose these and that's it. But if our charge is to be recommending adoption, or of a law by the time the moratorium expires, we're just narrowed to just a few of these types of tools that we have available.
And it well could be also that we might end up developing ourselves into multifaceted directions in terms of maybe the group will decide that it might be viable to pinpoint certain short-term approaches, and at the same time some of us might be wanting to think about what it would mean then to develop longer-term approaches that would extend beyond those limitations. And that's kind of how I'm imagining what might transpire over the next month. And it's interesting because Greg and I have both been doing a lot of separate research over the past couple of months about some of these areas, and it's just been interesting for me to begin to understand some of the limitations to things that I thought would just be commonsensical that we could just do. So if we can come to some of those common understandings next week, then I think it'll really help us move along quite efficiently. But I do want us to spend the week getting on some common ground, both with some of this terminology and the context for some of these approaches that we can present. And then I think we'll be in a more informed position to make some decisions about process. Does that sound reasonable? And I know what I appreciate is everybody seems really anxious to get going. and we kind of all understand why. And I am too. So that's why I appreciate your willingness to meet again already next week. So we'll meet next Monday at 7. And Rebecca will certainly fill you in, and I'd be happy to talk with you in the meantime or after the meeting, right after the meeting. Maybe we should chat before the meeting so I get a sense of your perspective based upon what you've read, so I can report to everybody. And then it might be, we can talk about this next week, but who knows? I mean, we've to facilitate Rebecca's schedule, since she can't meet on third Mondays, maybe we might consider just meeting 3 weeks in a row first and really getting moving. But that's pretty much up to all of you. And I know everybody's schedules are really crazy this time of year. And we also have the public hearing for the comprehensive plan coming up next week. But these are just things to consider. I mean, I would like it would just be so fabulous if we could cut some of this bait early on if it's just not fitting, so that we can sharpen our focus and achieve the achievable. Does that sound reasonable to everybody? Any other questions, comments? I hope this first meeting has been helpful. It's been really helpful to me. And it's, I think, having us just walk through those points of the comprehensive plan and my being able to be further informed by how you read it and what you understand to be the pressure points of the plan, I think are really, really important and helpful. So this is a fabulous group. And I realize if we were meeting in person, the dynamics would be very different. And I think Zoom kind of sometimes makes people reluctant to speak up. But I think the group is already loosening up and we can see how we can operate on a kind of extemporaneous way. So I don't always have to call on everybody and everything. Does this sound good? Fabulous. So we'll move forward. Greg and I put our heads together just for a little bit of tweaking of what we can send out. We'll send some homework and wish everybody to have a great week.
Okay.
And thanks for those of you who joined us who are not on the task force. We really welcome your participation. And if you came late, next week we'll start with an opportunity for the public to provide comments through a privilege of the floor designation. So you could make comments to us for up to 3 minutes before we begin our deliberations. Okay. Thanks everybody. Have a great week. It's just the beginning of the week. It feels like already it's the end of the week. So I really appreciate your joining us and we'll see you soon.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye. Thanks, Greg.
Thanks, Tom.
Have a good night.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Ken.
You're welcome. We'll find out something to make things work.
Yeah, we're going to work on this. I'm sorry that happened.
All right.
Thank you.
Well,
Bye.
Thank you.